A newly leaked audio recording appears to show former President Donald Trump discussing sensitive documents with people who didn't have security clearances during a 2021 meeting in Bedminster, New Jersey. In this audio, first obtained by CNN, the former president seems to acknowledge he knowingly held on to a document about a potential attack on Iran.
This totally wins my case, Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. I think we can probably get it.
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
The 2-minute audio recording could hold key evidence in Trump's indictment over his handling of classified information after he left the White House. David Kelly is the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He's also an experienced trial lawyer and investigator, and he joins us now. Thank you for being with us.
What's up, guys? You're tuned into Jack Mockler. In a packed courtroom, prosecutors played an audio recording of Trump's own voice. At the defense table, Trump froze, his face going pale in an instant, as his own words filled the room in a moment no legal preparation could have anticipated. His body, typically radiating confidence even in the most hostile environments, became absolutely motionless. The color drained from his cheeks as if someone had pulled a plug, and he sat there like a statue, staring ahead with an expression that observers would later describe as stunned disbelief. This was not the performance of a man who had been caught off guard, but was trying to maintain composure. This was the visceral, involuntary reaction of someone who had just heard something he never expected to hear in public, something he probably thought would never see the light of day. And everyone in that room saw it. The jurors, the gallery, the prosecutors, even his own lawyers.
On this recording, which the NewsHour hasn't independently verified, Donald Trump is also heard saying, quote, "It's so cool," and that the information was classified and, quote, "highly confidential." How might the special counsel leverage this recording as evidence in the indictment against the former president?
I think a special counsel would look at this recording as if he's opening a chest and suddenly the glow of gold shines in his face when he sees evidence like this. It's quite a recording. I think it does principally two things. One, it helps prove one of the overt acts alleged in the indictment, namely that he showed documents to folks who didn't have clearances. And two, it also really speaks to his state of mind. It says that he knew that he couldn't declassify it. He knew that he shouldn't be showing it. So these are all things that kind of fly in the face of a lot of the public statements that he's making, including the one that he made today, that he did nothing wrong.
Well, the episode is referenced in the special counsel indictment. Donald Trump has, of course, pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. How might a jury react to hearing this audio as opposed to just reading the transcript in black and white?
They all watched as Trump's carefully constructed facade of invincibility crumbled in real time, replaced by something far more human and far more damning. The recording itself has sent shockwaves through the legal community and beyond. Legal experts who have analyzed descriptions of what the tape contains are using phrases that should terrify anyone facing criminal charges. Textbook obstruction of justice, smoking gun evidence, a defense attorney's worst nightmare. These are not terms used lightly. These are the kinds of phrases that prosecutors dream of hearing applied to their evidence, and that defense teams dread hearing applied to the case against their client. The recording reportedly captures Trump in his own voice, using his own words, discussing a deliberate plan to conceal classified documents from federal investigators who were actively looking into his handling of those sensitive materials after he left the White House.
Well, it's interesting. You always like to have something more real life than just a transcript. And having it here and hearing his own voice, because it's really unlikely that he will testify on his own behalf. And I think the government will try to use his recordings to hear his own voice. And also, not only does it bring more life to the courtroom, but it's also a little less cumbersome than having just a transcript there and having people read along with it. Having the real life voice there is exponentially better in terms of the form of evidence.
As you mentioned, Donald Trump reacted to this leaked recording today. Here's what he told Fox News while speaking in New Hampshire.
We did absolutely nothing wrong. This is just another hoax. It's called, I would say, election interference more than anything else. But everything was fine. We did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it.
How do his public statements, in which he oftentimes admits to the thing that he's accused of, he often says, I took those documents, I had every right to take those documents, how does that complicate his legal case?
This is not circumstantial evidence that requires inference or interpretation. This is not a witness whose credibility can be attacked or whose motivations can be questioned. This is the defendant himself, on tape, apparently discussing criminal conduct. And the way it came to light only adds to the drama. According to multiple sources with knowledge of the investigation, the recording was unearthed by a private investigator working for the prosecution and was handed over by someone who made a conscious decision to cooperate with the government. Someone who was close to Trump, someone who had access to private conversations, someone who decided that their conscience or their legal exposure or their sense of duty to the country.
A defiant Donald Trump tonight on the campaign trail.
Every time the radical left Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it a badge, a great, great, beautiful badge of honor and courage.
Mr. Trump blasting the special counsel, DOJ, and FBI for what he labeled an illegally leaked and spun audio recording, calling it election interference. In the recording obtained by NBC News, the former president is heard discussing with aides and writers working on former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' memoir what appears to be a classified document from General Mark Milley about plans for an attack on Iran.
They presented me this is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
In the July 2021 recording, Mr. Trump acknowledging the sensitive nature of the document.
It is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
And that he had not declassified it.
Was more important than protecting the president from the consequences of his own actions. The question of who leaked this recording is almost as significant as the content of the recording itself, because it reveals something profound about the state of Trump's inner circle and the loyalty that has always been his most cherished currency. The source could be a cooperating witness, someone who had been part of Trump's operation for years, who had witnessed countless private conversations and handled sensitive materials, and who finally decided to flip and help prosecutors build their case. Or, even more dramatically, the source could be a lawyer from Trump's own defense team who made the extraordinary decision to cooperate with prosecutors.
Yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
The special counsel who has charged the Republican frontrunner with 37 federal criminal counts related to his handling of classified documents had already released a partial transcript of the meeting. Last week, Mr. Trump denying there was a classified document at all.
There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories, and articles.
Mr. Trump, who has pleaded not guilty, was asked about the recording today.
What did I say wrong in those recordings? I didn't even see the recording. All I know is I did nothing wrong.
Garrett, there's also a major headline tonight coming out of the Supreme Court. What can you tell us?
That's right, Lester. The court rejected a legal theory that would have radically reshaped elections by giving state legislatures almost complete control over how they are run. Instead, federal courts will still be able to rule on election-related cases.
Rather than continue defending someone they had come to believe was guilty of serious federal crimes. Either scenario represents a catastrophic breach of trust from Trump's perspective. Either scenario means that someone he trusted deeply, someone who had access to his most private and sensitive conversations, decided that they could no longer stay silent. If it was a cooperating witness from his inner circle, then Trump has to be wondering right now with increasing paranoia who else might be talking to prosecutors behind his back, and what else they might have handed over in exchange for leniency or immunity. If it was one of his own lawyers, the implications are even more staggering. Attorney-client privilege is supposed to be one of the most sacred protections in the legal system, designed to ensure that clients can speak freely with their lawyers without fear that their words will be used against them. But there is an exception to that privilege, the crime fraud exception, which allows lawyers to disclose communications if those communications were made in furtherance of a crime or fraud. If Trump was using his conversations with lawyers to plan obstruction of justice, then those conversations may not be protected at all, and any lawyer who participated in them might feel legally obligated to come forward. The fact that a lawyer would break that privilege and hand over a recording of private conversations with their client suggests they believe they had an ethical obligation to do so. Now, let's talk about what the recording actually contains, because that is ultimately what matters most for the trial and for Trump's fate. According to legal experts who have been briefed on the contents or have analyzed detailed descriptions, the tape captures Trump explicitly discussing how to handle and hide evidence from investigators. This is not vague or ambiguous. This is not the kind of conversation that could be interpreted in innocent ways if you are inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. This is allegedly Trump on tape, using his own words, to talk about concealing materials from federal investigators, and that is quite literally the legal definition of obstruction of justice under federal criminal statutes. Obstruction of justice is a very serious federal crime that can carry significant prison sentences, even when the underlying conduct being investigated turns out not to be criminal in the end. In other words, even if Trump could somehow prove that his initial possession of the classified documents was legal and proper, which is already a very difficult argument to make, the act of trying to hide those documents from investigators and obstruct their investigation is itself a completely separate and independent crime that could send him to federal prison for years. And now prosecutors have what they say is a recording of Trump discussing exactly that kind of concealment strategy in his own voice, using his own words that cannot be attributed to anyone else, or blamed on some overzealous aide who was acting without his knowledge. Legal experts are using phrases like slam dunk evidence and smoking gun when they talk about this recording because it is exactly the kind of direct and unambiguous evidence that prosecutors dream about finding and that defendants have absolute nightmares about having used against them. The courtroom reaction when this recording played tells you everything you need to know about how powerful this evidence is and how damaging it is to Trump's defense. Jurors who have been sitting through weeks of testimony and exhibits and legal arguments, and who have probably gotten pretty good at maintaining neutral facial expressions, suddenly showed visible and unmistakable signs of shock and intense attention. Observers reported that multiple jurors were leaning forward in their seats, physically drawn toward the speakers that were playing Trump's voice, as if they could not believe what they were hearing. Some reportedly had their mouths open in apparent disbelief and astonishment. All 12 of them were focused with laser intensity on every single word as the recording played, capturing what sounded like a former president of the United States planning criminal obstruction of justice. And then there was Trump himself, sitting at the defense table just a few feet from the jury box, as his own voice filled the courtroom and echoed off the walls. Observers described him as completely frozen in place, not moving a muscle, not reacting visibly, not whispering to his lawyers, not doing anything except sitting there motionless with a pale and drained expression on his face as he absorbed the horrible reality that his own recorded words were being used against him in front of the 12 people who will vote on whether he goes to prison. Trump's lawyers clearly understood immediately how devastating and potentially case-ending this moment was, because they jumped up almost before the recording even finished playing and urgently requested an emergency recess from the judge. That is crisis mode behavior from a defense team. That is a group of lawyers who know they just got hit with something massive that they were not prepared for and need time desperately to figure out how to respond and whether there is any possible way to minimize the catastrophic damage. When your lawyers are asking for emergency breaks in the middle of the prosecution's presentation of evidence, you know something has gone very, very wrong for your case and your chances of acquittal. The fact that the defense team apparently did not know this recording existed or did not know it would be played during trial suggests either a major failure in the discovery process or a last-minute evidence reveal that caught absolutely everyone off guard. Either way, it represents a significant tactical advantage for the prosecution and a serious setback for the defense. Because the defense now has to figure out some way to address this recording, and right now, sitting here today, it is genuinely hard to see what that strategy could possibly be. They cannot claim the recording is fake or manipulated without presenting actual evidence to support that claim, and voice analysis would quickly confirm whether it is really Trump on that tape. They cannot attack the credibility of a witness when the witness is essentially Trump himself speaking in his own words on audio tape. They could try to argue that the recording was obtained illegally and should be excluded from evidence, but that ship has almost certainly sailed if the judge already allowed it to be played in open court in front of the jury. They could try to argue that Trump's words on the tape do not actually mean what they sound like they mean, and that he was speaking hypothetically or joking or being taken out of context, but that is going to be an incredibly tough sell when the jury heard what they heard with their own ears and watched Trump freeze in apparent shock when he heard it too. The reality is, this recording may have fundamentally changed the trajectory of this entire trial in a way that simply cannot be undone. No matter how skilled Trump's lawyers are, juries remember bombshell moments like this one. They remember seeing defendants freeze in visible shock and go pale. They remember hearing defendants appear to incriminate themselves in their own words and their own voice. And they carry those powerful memories with them into the deliberation room when they sit down together to decide guilty or not guilty on each count in the indictment. Trump is not completely out of this fight yet, and criminal trials can take unexpected turns in both directions as evidence continues to come in and lawyers make their arguments. But right now, in this moment, after what happened in that courtroom with that devastating recording, things look very, very bad for the former and current president of the United States. The prosecution has what appears to be direct evidence of obstruction of justice, obtained through a cooperating witness or a flipping defense lawyer, and presented in a way that left even the most seasoned courtroom observers stunned. The defense is scrambling, requesting emergency recesses, trying to figure out how to respond to evidence they apparently did not know existed. The jurors are visibly affected, leaning forward, mouths open, absorbing every word. And Trump himself is frozen, pale, reacting in a way that no amount of political spin or media manipulation can explain away. Let's think about the broader implications of this moment, because they extend far beyond the specific outcome of this trial. This recording represents the kind of evidence that can reshape public perception, that can change the way historians write about this presidency, that can affect the political calculations of every Republican politician who has been standing by Trump. Because when the public hears that Trump is on tape discussing obstruction of justice, it becomes much harder to dismiss the entire case as a partisan witch hunt. It becomes much harder to claim that the prosecutors are just out to get him. It becomes much harder to maintain the narrative that this is all politically motivated persecution. The tape is the tape. It exists. It was played in open court. People heard it. And those people will talk about what they heard. The media will analyze it endlessly. Political opponents will use it as ammunition. And Trump's supporters, even the most devoted ones, will have to confront the reality of what is on that recording. Some will dismiss it, of course. Some will find ways to rationalize it or explain it away. But others will have doubts. Others will wonder if maybe there is something to all of this. Others will start to question the narrative they have been fed. And that erosion of trust, that slow but steady loss of confidence, can be more damaging to Trump than any single legal defeat. There is also the question of what happens next in the trial itself. The defense will have to decide whether to put Trump on the stand to try to explain his words on the recording, a move that carries enormous risks. Testifying would expose Trump to cross-examination by prosecutors who would be eager to poke holes in his explanations and highlight inconsistencies. It would allow the prosecution to ask him directly about the recording, about his intentions, about what he meant when he said those words. And any misstep, any inconsistency, any moment of anger or defensiveness would be captured on camera and used against him. On the other hand, not testifying would leave the recording essentially unchallenged, allowing the jury to draw their own conclusions from what they heard. Either option carries significant risks, and Trump's lawyers will have to weigh those risks carefully as they plan their next moves. But the clock is ticking, the trial is ongoing, the jury is watching, and every day that passes brings them closer to deliberation and a verdict that could change American history forever. The reaction in that courtroom when the tape played tells you absolutely everything you need to know about how damaging this evidence really is and how seriously everyone in that room took what they were hearing. The jurors, the 12 people who are actually going to decide Trump's fate in this case and determine whether he walks free or goes to prison, showed visible signs of shock and intense focused attention as the recording played through the speakers for everyone to hear. These are people who have been sitting through weeks and weeks of testimony and evidence and legal arguments from both sides, and they have probably developed pretty good poker faces by now when it comes to reacting to what they hear in the courtroom. Jurors know they are being watched, and they try to stay neutral and not give away what they are thinking. But this recording broke through that professional composure in a way that was visible to everyone watching. Observers in the courtroom reported that jurors were leaning forward in their seats, straining to hear every word. Some reportedly had their mouths hanging open in apparent disbelief at what they were hearing come out of those speakers. All of them were staring with laser focus and intense concentration as Trump's own voice filled the room, describing what sounded very much like a criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice and hide evidence from federal investigators. And Trump himself, the defendant whose freedom and future are on the line in this trial, just sat there frozen in his chair at the defense table, completely unable to move or react or do anything as he realized in real time that his own recorded words he probably thought would never be heard by anyone outside his closest and most trusted circle, were being used against him in open court in front of the jury that will ultimately decide whether he spends years of his life behind bars in a federal prison. Keep watching this story extremely closely, because we are witnessing history unfold in real time, and the next few days and weeks could determine whether a president goes to prison for the first time in American history. The legal landscape has shifted dramatically. The evidence that was just presented has the potential to fundamentally change the outcome of this trial. The defense is scrambling. The prosecution is emboldened. The jurors are paying close attention. And Trump himself is facing the most serious legal jeopardy of his entire life. This is not a moment that can be spun or dismissed. This is a moment that will be studied and analyzed for years to come. This is a moment that could define the legacy of a presidency and the future of American political accountability. So, stay tuned. Keep your eyes on this courtroom, because what happens next will shape the course of American history for decades to come.